Ever stop and think about all the construction going on around us? Buildings popping up, roads being repaved. It's kind of mind-boggling when you really think about it.
It's easy to take it for granted, but yeah, the construction industry is a real powerhouse, and it's got a massive footprint, especially when it comes to the environment.
Right, and a big part of that footprint comes from those diesel-guzzling machines you see on every job site.
Exactly. Diesel engines, as much as they've got going for them in terms of power, they also come with a hefty environmental price tag.
So that's what we're digging into today. Can hydrogen really be the clean fuel alternative that construction needs? I think you're going to find this deep dive particularly interesting, especially given your own commitment to sustainability.
I'm all ears. The possibilities with hydrogen are pretty exciting, especially when we start talking about fuel cell technology.
Fuel cells, now that's where things get really futuristic, at least to me. Can you break down how those things actually work?
Well, picture a hydrogen fuel cell like an energy converter. It takes hydrogen and oxygen and, through an electrochemical reaction, transforms them directly into electricity.
Electrochemical, huh? So no combustion, no loud explosions, just a clean, quiet reaction.
You got it. Inside the fuel cell, there's an anode and a cathode, separated by an electrolyte membrane. The hydrogen goes to the anode, oxygen to the cathode. Now, this membrane allows positively charged hydrogen ions to pass through, but not the electrons. And that movement of electrons, that's what creates the electric current to power a motor.
Elegant and efficient. And this is what has the potential to make construction sites quieter, right? No more roaring diesel engines, just the quiet hum of electric motors powered by this hydrogen-oxygen dance. What kind of impact could that have on air quality, especially in cities where construction never seems to stop?
The impact could be huge. Think about it. Cleaner air for the workers on those sites, cleaner air for the people living and working nearby.
Not to mention the reduction in greenhouse gases, which is crucial if we want to get serious about tackling climate change. It almost sounds too good to be true. Are there any drawbacks to these fuel cells we should be aware of?
Well, like any new technology, there are always challenges to overcome. One of the biggest hurdles for hydrogen fuel cells is the lack of, well, refueling infrastructure. We're used to having gas stations everywhere, but hydrogen refueling stations are still few and far between.
It's like the early days of electric cars. Trying to find a charging station felt like searching for a needle in a haystack.
Exactly. And it creates that classic chicken and egg problem. Construction companies are hesitant to invest in hydrogen-powered equipment if they can't easily refuel them, and the infrastructure development is slow because the demand isn't quite there yet.
It's a bit of a stalemate. But even if we had the infrastructure, there's still the issue of the hydrogen itself, right? I've heard there are different types, some considered cleaner than others.
You're right, not all hydrogen is created equal. Green hydrogen, that's the gold standard. Produced using renewable energy sources, it has practically zero carbon footprint. But there's also gray hydrogen, the most common type, derived from natural gas. And while cheaper to produce, that process does release carbon dioxide.
So it's like choosing between organically grown produce and the conventionally grown stuff. You want the sustainable option, but it's not always readily available or affordable, at least not yet.
That's a great analogy. And then on top of all that, we can't forget about storage. Even compressed hydrogen isn't as energy dense as diesel, so you need larger tanks to store the same amount of energy.
That creates a challenge for construction equipment where space is often limited. Bigger tanks, more frequent refueling stops, that could really throw a wrench into those tight construction schedules.
It's definitely a factor to consider. But the good news is that researchers are working on new materials and technologies all the time, trying to improve hydrogen storage and make it more compact and efficient.
So it seems like hydrogen fuel cells could really shake things up in the construction world. But it's not just talk, right? There are some big players already putting their money where their mouth is.
Oh, absolutely. Companies like, well, JCB, for example, they're known for their innovative engineering, and they've actually developed a fully functional prototype of a hydrogen-powered excavator.
An excavator running on hydrogen? That's impressive.
It is. And get this, they didn't just take an off-the-shelf fuel cell and stick it in there. They actually designed and built their own, specifically optimized for the demands of construction equipment.
Wow, now that's commitment. So they're really all in on this hydrogen future. Are there any other big names making similar moves?
Definitely. Lieber, another giant in the industry, they're known for their massive cranes and earth-moving equipment, and they're also investing heavily in hydrogen fuel cell technology.
What's their approach? Are they building their own fuel cells too?
It seems like they're taking a slightly different tack. They're partnering with bunch of research institutions and universities really tapping into the latest advancements in fuel cell technology.
So a more collaborative approach, pooling resources and knowledge, that makes a lot of sense. What kind of equipment are they focusing on?
From what I've seen, they're developing a whole range of hydrogen-powered machines. Excavators, wheel loaders, they're even working on a hydrogen-powered concrete mixer.
They're really covering all the bases. It's like they're trying to show the world that hydrogen can power an entire construction site. And it's not just the European companies, right? I've heard Hyundai is also throwing their hat into the ring.
Absolutely. Hyundai Construction Equipment, they're in a unique position because they can leverage their expertise in both the automotive and heavy machinery sectors. And they're doing exactly that. They've partnered with Hyundai Motors, who've already made significant progress in hydrogen fuel cell technology for their cars.
Right. Why reinvent the wheel when you can learn from your own colleagues? What type of construction equipment are they focusing on?
Their initial focus seems to be on excavators and wheel loaders. And here's the kicker. They're aiming to have commercially available hydrogen fuel cell versions ready to hit the market in just a few years.
Wow, that's a pretty aggressive timeline. It shows they're serious about getting this technology out there quickly. It's really turning into a race to the future of clean construction. We can't forget about Volvo construction equipment either.
Oh, you're right. They've been leading the charge in electrifying construction equipment,
Right.
and now they're adding hydrogen fuel cells to their portfolio. They've even got a prototype hydrogen-powered articulated hauler. It's incredibly exciting. It seems like every major player in the construction equipment industry is exploring hydrogen in one way or another. It really speaks volumes about its potential to transform construction as we know it.
It's like a technological arms race, but in a good way, right? A race toward a cleaner, greener future.
Mhm.
But with all this talk about fuel cells, are there any companies focusing on hydrogen combustion engines?
That's a great question. While fuel cells are getting a lot of buzz, some companies see hydrogen combustion engines as a more immediate solution, especially for those heavy-duty applications and for companies that might not be ready to go all in on fuel cells just yet.
That makes sense. Finding the right tool for the job. Right. So we've got fuel cells on one side, combustion engines on the other. Both offer a path toward cleaner construction, but they're very different beasts. Before we dive into that comparison, I think it's important to take a step back and consider the big picture. We've talked about the potential for hydrogen to significantly reduce the carbon footprint of construction. But what does that actually look like in the real world? What kind of impact could a large-scale shift to hydrogen-powered construction have on the environment, locally and globally? So we've got ourselves a real battle of the titans here, fuel cells versus combustion engines, both promising a greener future for construction, but with different approaches.
But of course, we have to talk about cost. That's a major factor for any industry, especially one as cost-conscious as construction.
So let's get down to brass tacks. Which technology makes more economic sense right now?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. Both fuel cells and combustion engines come with their own set of costs. Right now, fuel cells are more expensive to manufacture because of the complex materials and processes involved.
But I've heard those costs are expected to go down as production scales up and the technology matures.
That's the hope. And on the combustion engine side, while they might be cheaper to implement initially, we still need to factor in the cost of building out that hydrogen infrastructure, which is going to require significant investment.
It's like what we saw with electric vehicles. Building out those charging networks was and still is a huge undertaking.
Precisely. But despite the challenges, it feels like the construction industry is on the cusp of a major transformation. The momentum behind hydrogen is undeniable.
I agree. Whether it's fuel cells or combustion engines or maybe a combination of both, hydrogen has the potential to make construction a much cleaner industry.
I couldn't agree more. And to really make this hydrogen dream a reality, a few things need to happen. First, we need a robust and widespread hydrogen infrastructure. Think strategically located refueling stations along major transportation corridors and near construction hubs.
It's like building a network of charging stations for electric vehicles, but supersized for those massive construction machines.
Exactly. Second, we need to ramp up the production of green hydrogen. That means producing hydrogen using renewable energy sources, so we're not just shifting emissions from one sector to another.
We're talking about a whole new clean energy ecosystem.
Precisely. And finally, we need to continue driving down the costs of both fuel cell and combustion engine technologies so that they're accessible to all construction companies, not just the big players.
It's a massive undertaking, but the potential payoff is enormous. A cleaner, more sustainable construction industry and a healthier planet for everyone. And as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of hydrogen-powered construction, we leave you with this thought. The construction industry may not be known for its rapid pace of change, but the winds are shifting and the drive toward cleaner technologies is gaining momentum. So the next time you see those giant machines at work, take a moment to consider the future you want to build. What choices can you make in your own life and your own work to support a more sustainable future for construction and for the world?